My name is Phung Huynh. I'm a Los Angeles-based artist with a practice in drawing, painting, public art, community engagement, and activism. I'm also a proud mother of 2 boys. I'm an educator, and I'm a refugee from Vietnam of Cambodian and Chinese descent.
Could you tell us a little bit about your art practice and how it's developed throughout the years?
My primary practice and my love in becoming an artist stem from drawing and painting mostly. Actually, I should go back further in that I realize now, after 20 years of making art, that my first introduction to art was really my grandmother's and my mom's. And it wasn't going to museums and galleries, but it was from my grandmother's cooking and sewing and showing me that that's how you're creative and express yourself. And it didn't take me until 20 years of getting institutionalized ways of understanding art that was my first introduction to art.
That's beautiful. I think that's kind of like one of the most unrecognized arts, right?
For sure.
The next question is, how were you introduced to SHG? How did you come by us?
Oh my gosh, everybody knows self-help graphics, right? It's the champion of LA art. It's community-based. It has everything that any artist, especially artists involved with social activism, social justice, and community-based values would have the honor of being here. So I used to take piano lessons next to the old building growing up here. I feel like the legacy of self-help graphics definitely is forward-thinking, and everybody here knows about self-help graphics. But it was Mio Stevens Gandala who invited me and 25 other artists to participate in the Dystopia Utopia Atelier. So that's my first official project here at Self-Help Graphics, although I've always been in love with this place.
I always think it's sweet that everybody has a memory with the old building, right? Like that mosaic building is like such an iconic piece in history, in everybody's history. Not
only that, but also taking piano lessons and art lessons right next door to that building.
Oh wow.
And it's so crazy. Yeah.
Who's taking piano lessons then?
It was on First Street, no, right? It was on 3rd or 1st, I don't remember. But I remember the mosaic building. It was just like this community building next door for people who can't afford like fancy music lessons or art lessons, and so my parents would take us there to piano. And yeah, I forgot I took drawing classes there too. Yeah.
Small world. The next section is, could you tell us a little about the series that you're creating here, and if there are any prints that you want to highlight specifically?
Sure. I mean, for a very long time, I've always wanted to make work about my family's journey and how they resettled here as refugees. But it took a long time for me to figure out how to do it, because it's so important to me, and I want to honor my family's legacy in the right way. And it took 20 years for me to do it. And I think a lot of it had to do with being othered by growing up here and going to school here, because going to art school here in the 90s, it was mostly like Eurocentric, mostly white professors. And so I feel like there was not enough space for me to feel vocal about the story about my family. And it wasn't until the Trump administration and the heavily anti-immigrant sentiment that I felt it was time to share the story about my family and how we came here and the war trauma in Southeast Asia in the 70s and in the 80s. So I started making drawings on pink boxes because it honors the legacy of Cambodian and Cambodian Americans here in California. About 90% of donut shops in California are owned by Cambodian immigrants. And when they're pink because of these Cambodian immigrants who own these mom and pop donut shops everywhere. So I use that as a forum to talk about this story of assimilation, resettlement, becoming American, and most of all being a refugee. So I started drawing portraits of people that I interviewed in my community, in the Vietnamese and Cambodian community, and started drawing them because I wanted to share their story. And part of that reason also is because a colleague of mine gave me an LA Times magazine about, oh, do you know why pink donut boxes are pink? It's because of these Cambodian immigrants, and it was written by a white LA Times staff writer. And I felt that, this is something I grew up with decades. This is like my aunties and my uncles. And why is it that 20 years later, a white writer from the LA Times, writes about it, then people pay attention to it. And then it made me feel that it is important for people to tell their own stories. And so that's why I wanted to make this body of work. And I feel like self-help graphics is the perfect place for it because the values here and the support and advocacy at self-help graphics completely align with those kinds of values of decentering whiteness and by POC solidarity, immigrant rights. It's the perfect place for that. So this body of work is 7 portraits and 5 images of pink donut boxes with words and phrases from donut shops, and it focuses more on the second generation of donut kids. So these are kids who were born in the United States, but their parents survived genocide in Cambodia and would bring them in the donut shop at 3 a.m. in the morning and like put them on, make a bed out of flour sacks and let the kids sleep while they bake donuts. And when it was maybe about 7 o'clock, time to take the kids to school, the kids would go to school. The kids would come back after school, do homework. You know, they spent their summers helping out the family in these donut shops. So this project has a really special place in my heart.
That's beautiful. It makes me think about like, I have a local donut shop that happens to use pink boxes. I'm not sure if they're Cambodian or not, but I didn't know that the statistic was that high, that it's 90%.
And did you ask if they're?
I've never asked, but I always go to them for breakfast sandwiches because they make the best.
Which donut shop is it?
It's called Christie's Donuts in Hacienda Heights.
That is, okay, so can I tell you the story about that? Because
Yeah.
that's very important. So Ted Ngoy, he's a Cambodian refugee who came to California in 1975. And his first job was being a janitor at a church. And at night he would work at the gas station. And at the gas station, his coworker took a break and brought him some donuts, and he's never had donuts before. And he ate it. He's like, oh my God, what is this so good? And he brings them home to his family, and they all love it. And Ted Ngoy said, you know, we should save our money and get a donut shop, right? So he saved his money, and he went to this donut shop called Christie's, and said, I want to buy your donut shop. And I think it was like La Abra area. And they said, they kind of laughed at him like, okay, sure, you know, like this refugee, new person to the United States. And instead what he did was he applied for a job at Winchell's. He became a manager and learned the donut shop, you know, system and how to make donuts and manage a store, and eventually went back and bought that Christie's Donuts. So his first donut shop he owned was called Christie's. And he saved up more money and he bought another donut shop and more. And he would lease them. So as more Cambodians were coming to the United States, he would lease donut shops to these Cambodian refugees and immigrants. And then it became a place of assimilating, learning English, a place where families could work and take care of their kids, right? So if you're a mom and you have a 1-year-old, you know, I know this is illegal, but you bring your baby, your kids, you know, and it was a very important space for these families to remake their lives. So it's so cool that you said Christie's.
I think I've heard of that. That guy. He's like, he has a nickname, right? The Donut King.
The Donut King.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
there's a documentary of him.
Yeah. The last bit is just if you want to share about your process here in the studio. You know, from start to finish. Did you have to adjust in any way, or what was it like being in the studio for you?
Well, I'm not a printmaker. You know, my roots come from drawing and painting, and so I feel like as an artist it's important to expand and grow and be uncomfortable to become a better artist and to explore. And so I feel like self-help graphics facilitated that for me, to allow me to be uncomfortable and make work with something that's unfamiliar, but also couldn't have done it with my cousin Dewey, Tafoya, and Gabby Claro. Just giving my shout outs. But really, no joke, you know, without them, there's a lot of decisions I can't make because I just don't know. I don't know this medium. And so I feel really grateful for that opportunity.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Does anyone want donuts? I can bring more donuts.